Hey, let's make something. Today, a d20 die with a diorama inside of the Tower of Art at Unseen University. So I started by making a base that's just some resin, dyed black and brown, put into a mold as you see there. And then I sanded the top so paint would be able to stick to it. And then I decorated the bottom with octarine magic colors, because it's nice to see something if you roll a 1. And I planned out where I wanted to have a river sort of going around a bend, and the tower will be in the middle. And then I just decorated using acrylic paints to make it look like the riverbank. The river would have been nice to make it clear and blue, but we know the river Ankh doesn't look like that, so we got some mud, some browns and greens. And this is just UV resin, so I can cure that quickly. Now we're ready for some buildings. And these are made of polymer clay. I used this rippled embossing sheet to roll out the tower, because it's going to be so small I wasn't going to be able to put real bricks on it, but I wanted to give it some kind of texture. Here I'm making a little humpback bridge. And all of this was just making geometric shapes. I used a form to make a dome. I rolled out a cylindrical shaped building. Yeah, everything's so small. It's just sort of the shapes you want to get right. Which was tricky. I did go back a few times and change some things. In the tower base here, I'm just using a knife edge to emboss some distance between stones. And here I'm using some actual twigs to make tree trunks. They have to be so small. So they're just twigs, white glue, green flocking to make the tops of the trees. And I've never tried this before, but I think it worked out pretty well in the end. These parts are so small and easy to squish. I ended up baking them in stages and then sort of gluing them together with glue that can go in the oven, baking them again. So I baked the tower, and then I'm adding turrets to it. I wanted to give it that fantasy tower look where turrets that are probably defying gravity would sort of sprout around the top. I got some of these petri dishes that are borosilicate glass, which means they can go in the oven, and they are very good for making miniatures because you can see exactly what you're doing and then put it all in the oven. Here I used a copper bauble to make the top of that building because I knew I was going to paint the whole dome copper. And I'm using some extra clay to join the tower together, make it look like it's all one building. This took some trial and error, but I figured out I could make little witch hat shapes and then sort of squish them down, and that would make like a conical shingled roof for a tower. Trying out some building shapes. And this is very handy to have if you're painting miniatures. This is a black wash that's just black acrylic paint, water, mostly water, and then a little bit of soap because that breaks the surface tension so it won't bead up. It'll fall into those little crevices, which is exactly what I want for it to look like, cracks between stone. And I just tried to paint everything some interesting colors. But not too bright, because I don't want them to look like toys. I want them to look like tiny little buildings. There's more of that black wash. You'll see on this building it really sinks into all the edges under the roof along the base. And that really makes something look more realistic. I don't know about that, but grimy, which is nice. Here's the tower all grimed up. And then some dry brushing in white. So just an old beat up paintbrush, gently brushed over the edges to make it look like weathered stone. Here I'm testing the tower in a mold because the tower is supposed to be impossibly tall and I want it to extend all the way to the top of the die, but obviously it can't stick out. So after testing, I found out it was a little too tall, sanded it down a little bit, gluing everything in place with some more UV resin, and using some more paint to make a little dirt path around all the buildings. Using some more UV resin to glue down all those little trees. There, I'm pretty happy with that. And now to freeze it inside resin forever. So I poured out some clear resin. As you can see, many air bubbles inside of it, which are going to come out in the pressure pot. And I only filled it up to the level of the top of the towers. Ah, see, they're nice and clear. Because I wanted to add some clouds above the towers. And this is ivory soap that's been in the microwave until it bubbles up and turns into these crispy little clusters, which are great for making clouds in resin. I wanted to make it look like the tower was so tall it was breaking through the clouds, so I kind of made a ring around all the turrets at the top. And now it's cured. I used UV resin for that again. Now this mold I'm using here was a little bit failed when I cast it. So the sides are rough, which is why I'm sanding them down. But it was good I could cut the top off and then it could be a mold I could work inside, as I did. Trimming all the loose resin at the sides, filling it up in a proper mold so it would be the right shape. This is the inside of the die, so this is all the decorating I wanted to do, and now it's going to get the shell on it with the numbers. And this mold, so that there's less sanding, it only has the rough edges on one face, which means it's really hard to get the things into it, but it's worth it when you don't have to polish as much on the outside. Oh, here we go. Oh, it's looking good. It always looks so official when they get the numbers on them. Again, hard to get things into the mold, hard to get things out. Ah, but it all worked out. And then only the 20 face is the one with these extra bits of resin that I had to trim and now sand. I want them to be nice and smooth. So right now, as you saw, it's very rough. It's just been trimmed with an X-Acto knife. So it needs to be sanded down smooth like that. But now it has a lot of sand scratches. So 600, 800, 1200, 1500, 2000, 3000. There we go. So now that it's been sanded with all those, it's quite smooth. You don't see any rough lines in the surface. And now it needs to be polished with polishing papers. So I wet these down, and then there's 6 different grades that it goes through. So this is tedious work, but it doesn't take that long actually. You're just giving it a few seconds each time. But as you can see, it brings it up to a very high shine. And now I'm painting the numbers. I decided to go with a metallic purple, sort of an octarine magic color, and I love purple. So I paint all the numbers on, then I wipe off the excess from the surface with a little piece of a wet wipe. You can see I've cut those up. And that's it. I go up in numerical order so I don't lose my place. Then I let that dry. Then I do them all again to make sure the color is really good. And then I just polish it up one more time on that lightest polishing paper to make sure there's no extra paint on the surface. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll leave you with some shots of the finished die.